Point where no narrative is sacred, no media hoax is safe, and we zero in on the big picture. I'm your host, Janelle Rion. Can you feel it in the wind? It's 1775. Again. Some say Joe Biden beat Jimmy Carter in the race for worst president in history, and they'd be right if he showed up for work. But make no mistake, Biden is still leaving office with a legacy, courtesy Obama's staffers who've been running the country these past 4 years. Biden's legacy? He officially weaponized every federal agency to spy on your phone, emails, and text messages. Joe Biden will go down in history as the president who transformed the way the government spies on the American public. No, Biden didn't establish rules on how the government might listen in on your phone calls. He lifted the rules with the crooked stroke of his pen back in 2022 while no one was looking. On October 7, 2022, President Biden partially rescinded Presidential Policy Directive 28, PPD 28. This governed signals intelligence, aka your phone calls, text messages, emails, and even internet use. Policy Directive 28 was originally Obama's brainchild. Obama established the original rule as a means to put this legal veneer over his big brother fantasies. That veneer restricted the government from arbitrarily spying on U.S. citizens. And if it were to spy on U.S. citizens, well, then the government was required to apply through the courts for permission, the FISA system. The rule was essentially a way to keep government minimally accountable as it played big brother government listening in. But because the Biden administration was violating that order so aggressively through Obama handmaidens such as Susan Rice and Valerie Jarrett, Biden had no choice but to provide top cover. And all in the name of national security. Biden unleashed the government and gave it full permission to go after its political enemies.
Not a joke.
Here's a section Biden removed. Quote, "The United States shall not collect signals intelligence for the purpose of suppressing or burdening criticism or dissent." Why would you want to remove that part? Under Biden, FISA warrants, court permissions, are not necessary anymore to spy on your conversations. The FBI, CIA, NSA, IRS can now all claim their own probable cause to collect your personal data and use it against you based on what political candidate sign you have in your yard. Swapping recipes with your local Republican county volunteer? The NSA, CIA, FBI, and IRS will know how many pinches of salt and splashes of vanilla go into a domestic extremist in the making. This from the same government who reportedly offered wannabe spy Christopher Steele $1 million to manufacture evidence against Donald Trump. Your tax dollars used as bribes for fake dirt to take down the candidate of the other party. And they claimed to be the ones protecting democracy. Nice try. Fast forward to this week in the wake of the terrorist attacks in New Orleans and Las Vegas committed by U.S. Army veterans. The mainstream media is already blaming the right.
The threat from ISIS-inspired terror attacks is greater than it's been in a long time, particularly post-October 7th, in light of the controversy over the war in Gaza and people being inflamed across the Middle East about that. You also have a situation where political violence in the United States is increasingly a risk, and more people are turning to extremist ideologies, whether it's ISIS or whether it's people who don't like healthcare executives or whether it's far-right extremism.
What did these attacks have anything to do with far-right extremism? They didn't. The only reason the mainstream media, the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party, would drop that little tidbit is at the direction of their handlers, the desperate Obama leftovers still in our federal agencies, and with weeks to spare to put conservative Americans under a microscope. By unleashing the government's powers to spy on us, Biden 2 years ago cemented an ugly precedent, that of politicizing our government agencies against the American people. He unleashed the darkest instincts of the federal government, lifting the boundaries when it comes to attacking critics and political dissent. So, would you be shocked if these latest attacks from domestic extremists within our U.S. military triggers justifications to shut down our power before Inauguration Day? If it did, you'll have Biden's hand on Policy Directive 28 to thank. After all, in Biden's government,
there's anything we can't do.
Joining us now to discuss and talk about some of the narratives around all of this, Chad Robichaux, Force Recon Marine and the founder of Mighty Oaks Foundation. Chad, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on.
I wanted your given your background, I wanted your take, first of all, on the narratives that have come out about this Las Vegas terrorist. They have been labeling a lot of this activity as extremist activity, and then, as you saw in there, slipping over into saying these are far-right extremists, and then starting to villainize the special operators community by highlighting guys like the Las Vegas bomber. What's your take on the narrative so far?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to, if it's okay, I want to mention something that for your viewers. There's also another DoD directive that was signed from the Secretary of the Secretary of Defense, the Assistant Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks, DoD 5240.01. It hadn't been touched in 40 years, but on September 27, 2024, President Biden and the DoD lifted this policy, which also allows, this is the one that policy that prohibited Americans from being collected on by U.S. intelligence agencies and the United States military. And I thought that was very significant to the fact that you made this one that was done in 2022, that just before the election, the White House allowed the Department of Defense to lift this after 40 years of not being touched, to allow the military to collect.
So wait a second, what does that actually mean? So on the ground, it means that we have our assets collecting intelligence on U.S. citizens?
But it means they are allowed to now. I mean, for 40 years, American citizens have been protected from the United States military collecting and sharing information using military intelligence agencies, military resources, anything within the Department of Defense. And so that was prohibited under DoD Directive 5240. Hadn't been touched for 40 years, but on September 27th, 2024, this was changed and amended and it was amended in a 180-degree reversal, meaning the military is allowed to now use to use the military assets and intelligence agencies to collect, store, and share information from American citizens, and even utilize the military in a police capacity, even up to actually using force against citizens. So something Americans were protected from for 40 years was overturned September 27th, right before the election. And I thought it was just really significant to point out for your viewers, considering what you mentioned from 2022.
Oh, it goes right in line with what I was just saying. That's a terrifying move. I am shocked, and maybe not so shocked, but why, no one really was reacting to it or talking about it outside of, say, your community.
That's right. I mean, for my community, because look, I've worked as a special operator. I've worked in a very gray area of working with counterintelligence operations, counter-narcotics operations. I used to work in what's called JTF-6 missions on the border, working with the DIA and the DEA, DIA, the Border Patrol. And so we're working on the border, and we were under these laws called Posse Comitatus laws under DoD Directive 5240 to protect American citizens against us. If there was a vehicle that was loading drugs or illegals or even terrorists, and it had a U.S. license plate on it, I couldn't, as a military special operator, I couldn't take a picture of that license plate. I couldn't record that license plate. I couldn't even report that license plate to a federal authority because I'm in the military. I'm not allowed to collect that way. And so American citizens were protected from the military. So I worked under these rules. Every time we do one of these operations, we'd have the JAGs come in, the lawyers, and they brief us on 5240. And again, Americans were protected from it for 40 years. And now, all of a sudden, right before election, they 180-degree this directive. So
it's so apparent what they're doing. And what's even more concerning is we don't have as many guys like you inside the service. I mean, there's still good men and women in the service now. But the Biden administration has also done a very concerted, very good job of basically kicking out the good guys inside our military. really alienating a lot of our most talented men and women. And so the ones that are left are the ones who believe in the mission of, say, it's okay to surveil on U.S. citizens. It's okay to collect intelligence on U.S. citizens. Those are the people who are left inside our military increasingly under 4 years of Biden.
Yeah, COVID did it. And then after COVID it was DEI. The DEI things came in and really turned the mood of the military. And that's why I'm a big supporter of Pete Hegseth for SecDef, and I've been openly a supporter of him, because someone inside the institution is not going to change all the things that needs to be changed. The biggest problem with our national security is not our strategic capability on the battlefield. Our military is capable of doing anything on the battlefield anywhere around the world. Our biggest issue is our morale, our recruiting, and our retention. So the morale is the lowest I've seen in 30 years. The recruiting is the worst it's been since Vietnam, and the retention is the worst it's been since Vietnam. And like you said, the people we're retaining are not the people that we want in the military. And that's one of the things that Pete Hegseth, he wrote in his book, Against Warriors, is focused on. And that's why, I've been a big advocate for him. He's the one that's going to actually address those issues and make America safe, protect our national security, and get our military back to doing the work of the military, and not this DEI woke stuff, which is what, and you talk about this guy in Vegas. I texted Pete yesterday when this happened, Pete Hegseth. I texted him directly, and he texted me right back. It said, this is the problem when patriotism is not at the foundational core of our service members. And I don't know what this guy did. There's a lot of gray areas of a lot of unanswered questions about this Green Beret, blowing up his Tesla truck, in front of Trump Tower. But if he is guilty of what it looks like he's guilty of, this is the problem. It would be unimaginable to me that a special operator invested so much in this country and risked so much in a fight for freedom would do something like this outside of a military that's lost its foundation of patriotism. And I texted Pete that, because that's what we want to see back as the foundation of our military, is patriotic men and women who are raising a hand and willing to serve our nation. And that's been lost, and it's important we get it back.
Chad, I think those are excellent points. They explain a lot of the problems that we face right now culturally. But the other thing I wanted to get your take on is, I'm hearing rumblings within the special operators community and the intelligence community, people who are in both worlds, and they allude to the optics that are being pushed increasingly by mainstream media, by big lie media, as I call them. And the optics are this, that special operators are the bad guys. And there's kind of this shift saying, special operators are unstable, they're rogue, they're not the good guys. And this leads me to wonder, from your perspective, lay out what that culture is. Is there actually kind of a cultural divide or a tension between special operators and the regular kind of conventional warfare guys?
Yes and no. So one, there's always been a tension, because, you have two different entities, the conventional military and special operations military, have two very different roles in the battle. And America has been engaged in combat since 2001, and until now. By the way, it didn't end when we did that insane withdrawal. Right, we've been engaged in combat since 2001, and the special operations community has been highly engaged in kinetic warfare and special operations missions all over the world. However, when I came up in special operations, when I first got in special operations, one of the things that a wise leader told me was, we were out in the field training, and there was some Marine Corps infantry guys running up this hill in a place called Range 400 in Twin Palms, California. And he told me, he said, never forget those guys or the backbone of the military. Those guys are who we support. Special operations play a support role for all the conventional forces to do their job. And that perspective of humility is not something that I was just taught. It's something I've seen systemic across the board in special operations guys that recognize people of the conventional forces as being the foundation of the military. In my recent podcast, The Resilience Show, I interviewed Jocko Willink. Recently, I interviewed Marcus Luttrell. And both those guys, we all said the same thing, like, the guys who deserve the credit for getting in the trenches and fighting door to door, doing the door-to-door fighting, or the conventional forces in the military. One of the things we've seen after 20 something years of war is that is that the military works together systemically. And so for people on the outside to come in and say that there's this divide, there's always a tension there, but there's a mutual respect, I believe, against conventional forces and special operations forces. And we can't forget that the special operations forces aren't just athletes. They aren't just guys that were tough and better shape and mentally tougher. They have a GT score of 115 or higher, meaning they're probably some of the most intellectually intelligent and problem-solving people in the military. Equivalent to those test scores are equivalent to that to be an aviator or a pilot. So they're intelligent people. They're usually mature people to make it through training. They're very dedicated people, and who are most of the time patriots that love our nation. And usually they're pretty humble people. They're mostly guys that are very alpha and high achievers, so there's going to be always a little bit of arrogance there. But most of the time, they're humble enough to know that the guys on the ground kicking in those doors, those conventional warfighters, where the credit belongs on the battlefield.
What's interesting, I think, is the fact that you have these narratives that are now coagulating, especially around all the discrepancies out of this Las Vegas bomber. He was 19 years in service, a special operator. All the qualities that you just laid out does not make sense with what happened. And so obviously we're waiting for more details, but starting from the weapon he used, the way the bombs had been made and stored inside the vehicle, the way the whole thing was carried out, none of it makes sense. And then you have more headlines like the bomb that was planted on a train in Idaho. You have a bomb stop made in South Carolina, an 18-wheeler pulled over because it was suspected of carrying bombs. Outside our building here in Washington, D.C., we had a car jumping the curb and driving along the sidewalk. I hear some people saying that they feel like these are probing attacks. What do you think of that?
I think so too. Look, I'm not going to scream conspiracy or say this special operator, this Green Beret was a posse, but I will say that I have some questions. First of all, everything in the vehicle was totally incinerated, including his body. They said was unrecognizable. Yet his passport and his ID survived, which is very peculiar to me. I'd love to bet, arson investigator to be able to explain that. So that happened with the 9/11 attackers as well. All their passports, not all of a big portion of their passports survived somehow the incineration of the World Trade Center attacks. So I just think there's some questions we may not ever get answered. I don't know, but I would say the most important question is who is in this country and what's the current threat? Because for the last 4 years, our borders have been open. We know that there's been probably tens of thousands, and I don't mean that in an exaggerated number, probably over tens of thousands of bad actors from countries like Syria and Iraq and Iran and Pakistan and all over Africa that has made it in the United States, fighting age males with no women and children, made it in the United States, and they're distributed amongst the United States. We don't know where they are. Many of them have ties to terrorist organizations at a rate that we've never seen before in our country. And if one guy could do what he did in New Orleans, if one guy could do what happened in Las Vegas, I can tell you what me and 2 or 3 other guys could do in a country. If tens of thousands of them are here, and they're being or the others are being radicalized, whatever the threat to everyday Americans is terrifying. And I don't say that to scare Americans. I say that to tell Americans, be alert, be prepared, don't be afraid to dial 911. And if you see something abnormal, say something. If you know someone is doing something that seems radicalized, say something, because bad actors are here. They come here from abroad. They've been allowed to come here, and people are being radicalized. Say something, please. You will save someone's life, and be prepared. Learn how to carry a tourniquet. If you have kids, have tourniquets that fit your kids. Learn how to put 10 minutes of training, and you could potentially save a family member's life by just if you're a lady, keep a tourniquet in your purse. Those kind of things, like so many things we could be doing to prepare. I'm not saying it to terrify people, but the threat is here. And by the way, as happy as I am that we only have 18 days left of this madness, or however many days we have left of this madness, January 20th doesn't make America safe again. It's going to take time. It's going to take time to actually use our FBI to not be weaponized against American citizens and political opponents, but actually use the FBI for Kash Patel to lead it in a direction to go after terrorists and get these people out of our country. It's going to take time. Americans need to be prepared and need to be aware.
Great message. The changing of the guard can't come soon enough. Chad Robichaux, always a pleasure, always great insights. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks, Janelle. I appreciate it. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Will Mike Johnson last as Speaker of the House? Longtime political operator John Fredericks has some thoughts on this. We'll be right back.
I got this.
Today is a big day on the Hill. Not only is the 119th Congress being sworn in, the House votes for its Speaker. With GOP defectors, his fate is not guaranteed. President Trump has thrown his weight behind Mike Johnson, the current Speaker, and a solid majority of Republicans have been expected to have Johnson's back going forward. But just because he survives this time around does not mean his speakership will not be in danger in the near future. With different factions within the Republican Party emerging once again, we have joining us now political commentator and Godzilla of Truth himself, John Fredericks, on Mike Johnson's political future. Now, what a fluid situation. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, Janelle, thank you. First of all, Johnson, as everybody knows now, did not win on the first ballot. He had 2 no votes, Ralph Norman being one of them, and of course Tommy Massey, who said, "You can cut my fingernails off, I'm not going to vote for you," whatever. Right. Massey always thinks he's the smartest guy in the history of Congress, so we all have to deal with his ego. But now his vote matters. So there was a lot of other Freedom Caucus voters in the first ballot that just said their name, didn't vote at all, Andy Biggs being one of them. This is a colossal waste of time because now we got to wait multiple ballots to get this done. And as we're waiting it out, they're just wasting time. They could get everybody sworn in, and they could start working on President Trump's agenda right now. I think the biggest mistake that Johnson made is he didn't put out a clear and concise and cogent 5 or 6 point agenda that he could have copied right from President Trump's website. Elect me Speaker, here's the 6 things I'm going to do, 7 things I'm going to do, all of them the top 6 or 7 priorities of President Trump, and that's it. Then you're not voting against Johnson, then you're voting against President Trump's agenda, which none of them.
That's a great point.
But he failed to do that. So now it becomes, Johnson did this, Johnson, collaborates with Hakeem Jeffries, Johnson's not a leader. If they made it where you were not voting against Johnson, but against the president's agenda in the first 100 days, this thing would have been solved on the first ballot, in my judgment.
So, again, it only takes a few opposing votes on his side to knock him out and cause all this grief. Is there anything he can do at this point to change the minds of some of the stalwart members?
Well, I think, look, as this thing goes on, you got to ask yourself, why are they voting no? They don't have a speaker alternative. It's not like there's a speaker battle. Nobody else has come forward. So these are basically show and egomania votes, right? So they're on TV. They can, they call their name. They don't say their name. These are show pony votes. They accomplish nothing but waste time. At the end of the day, President Trump won this election in a landslide. Right? He has a very clear agenda for the first 100 days, and he doesn't want to waste time with the chaos ensuing that has been rolled out today. He wants to get started. And so these are just basically, it's not like they're saying, I'm voting against Johnson because this is what I need. They're just saying, I'm voting against Johnson because I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like the first CR that went out. Okay, what does that do now? Johnson has been endorsed by President Trump. There's no alternative. They don't have an agenda themselves. So now it's, what is the point of holding things up? And if you're negotiating something, tell us what it is so we can understand it. If it is, look, I want Chip Roy on rules, and then I'll vote for you. Put it out there. Let us know what it is that you want in the negotiation, because MAGA Nation is part of this fight.
Yes. As
you saw when we took down the first CR, as you saw now where we got Elon Musk with his $400 billion to back off HB1 visas. We shut Vivek Ramaswamy up, chastising parents about how we raise our kids in this country. Like, who does he think he is? Right? They both back down. MAGA Nation is now part of this argument. And the overwhelming majority of Trump voters want Trump's pick for speaker. That doesn't mean they want Johnson. They want Trump's pick for speaker right now. That's Mike Johnson.
Well, I think your point about if they would make their negotiations clear, it would be a little easier to have this discussion. With Elon and Vivek, I mean, I don't think they'd back down. They were just adjusting or, part of the negotiation saying, okay, fine, we need to reform H-1Bs. But in this case, in this congressional fight for Johnson, as you say, there doesn't seem to be a clear narrative amongst the dissenters right now. Do they change that at any point, or is this just a blanket diss against Mike Johnson to say we just don't want you around anymore? Who's their alternative?
Well, there's no plan. And the problem is in the dysfunction of the Republican Party as a whole is there's never a plan, right? There's no agenda on either side. Johnson hasn't told you what he's going to do. His detractors haven't said what they want. So here we are sitting here going through these show votes and wasting our time when no one has a clear understanding of what either side's objective is. And look, at the end of the day, Johnson's the speaker, right? He's the one responsible to corral his conference. You look at the communists on the other side, and that's basically what they call them, small d, big D, they're communists. You look at the communists on the other side of the aisle, 100% they vote in lockstep with their guy. 100%,
right.
No questions asked. Or what happens? Jeffries or Pelosi, they cut off their money. And they're going to get primaried and lose. They cut their money off. We don't do that. We play nice. Johnson has no agenda. And the dissenters, I don't know what they're doing because they haven't come out with anything either. So you're wasting valuable time is all I see it. And the people that are voted no, basically, I think these are ego votes because you've not told me why, or you or anybody, our viewers, why you're voting no. What exactly is it that you want? They haven't said that either.
Where do you see the future of the current Congress and the makeup of the Republicans going into the next 6 months? This is a speed bump. We're going to get over it.
Yes.
We're going to have a speaker, likely Johnson.
Yes.
But where does this leave us 6 months from now in the Trump agenda?
Well, you vote against one of the key pillars of the Trump agenda, and you're going to get primaried out. And if you don't lose the primary, you're going to be wounded. All these guys care about, and gals, you know this, you've been there like me on the Capitol. All they care about is that four-corner office, what their title is, what committee they're on, their big staffs,
Right.
Yes, congressman, no congressman. It's all baloney. All they fear is the voter. And when you get the voters turning against them, like they did, Bob Good in the 5th District, who, by the way, came out today and said, if I was there, I would not have voted for Johnson. McGuire came and beat him because Trump backed McGuire, because Bob Good was viewed as an obstructionist to the Trump agenda. That's why they voted him out. They're going to keep doing that. This is going to be the price they pay. So they're going to have to think 2 times about voting against any key positions that President Trump has, especially with Elon's money.
No, you bring up a great point, and I think this is something that the MAGA movement will have to be aware of going forward. And it's not just these personalities in Congress when their egos come into play. It's these personalities even on social media, the MAGA royalty, if you will, who are very influential on the social scene, who are not necessarily, they're very much about themselves. And I think every movement has that problem. Democrats and Republicans alike. But with the Republicans in power, the weaknesses within the movement are going to be exploited a lot more, especially by people who are a little more driven by themselves than they are for the movement.
Well, look, there's no question about it. Egos are always going to play a part here, especially when you get to social media. Look at me, how many followers I have, etc. But the one thing these people understand is MAGA voters rising up and voting him out. And that is the number one thing. That's why Vivek and Ramaswamy backed off their H-1B visa scheme, because they were getting skewered by the MAGA base on social media, right? And so there was nowhere for them to go with it. Some of the comments they made were ill-advised, and now they've backed off on it. They're threading the needle about reform.
I find it so funny, though. Like, I think that that's a division between capitalist MAGA and socialist MAGA. And hear me out. Look at what Bernie Sanders did just yesterday or 2 days ago. He came out and said, he basically sided with MAGA. but in a way, it's not a very capitalist argument. And there's a fine line between the capitalists and globalists and populism and socialism. So we're now entering this very funny land where we're navigating, not going too far to the right over into the globalist side, or not going too far left into the all-out socialist side. That's a debate that seems to me like a distraction from what really should have been talked about, which is illegal immigration. But, you know, debates have been formed and sides have been formed. What do you make of that whole episode?
Well, I'm a protectionist, so I never met a tariff I didn't like, and I want to protect American jobs. And those of us, the problem with the H-1B visa, as it started getting out into the media, is that everybody has a family member or someone in their circle that was outsourced because of an H-1B visa, lost their job because of an H-1B visa, got downsized or something. How many people came in? You know, they always sell us on this thing, oh, it's the best of the best, and we're going to do 85,000. It's only going to be engineers with MBAs and this and that. And then they bring in workers.
It's less than 500,000, and we're talking about 11 million illegal border breakers.
I understand they're two separate issues.
Yeah.
Right?
But whoever was pushing this conversation succeeded in moving the MAGA movement away from the illegal border burglars who have broken into our country, and they're now living off of American taxpayer dollars, and then had us all point our guns toward a much more fractionalized problem. Long term, it's not fractionalized, but right now, here and now, we have the border that we have to talk about, the illegal immigrants. So I'm worried about the distractions.
Or you could flip it, like I have, which is taking the opposite view that you have. You could flip it and say that because we are going to close the border, and because we are going to start deportation, and because we are going to stop the sieve of illegals coming in, that the backdoor way to get them in is through H-1B visas. So that's why people like me want to shut that down as well, because that's a backdoor that people come in, and it's a complete and utter scam. And those that have been involved in it are not happy with the big tech people pushing it because it drives down wages.
Well, I think that the border situation is not a done deal, and we need to focus. We need to keep driving at it. But here's what's so great about this side of the aisle. We have these conversations and we debate it. And as you say,
we have fun.
The Nancy Pelosi side does not debate their sides, only behind closed doors.
Right.
John Fredericks, always a pleasure to have you on, this time in studio. Thank
Honor
you so much.
to be here. Thank you. Hope to be invited again.
Is homegrown terrorism on the rise or just being noticed? Former Hollywood producer, historical researcher Mel Kay is here to discuss with some very interesting insights. We'll be right back. After the tragedy of New Orleans, America is taking a hard look at itself and wondering, is homegrown terrorism suddenly on the rise? Or have we just never noticed? A video obtained by Breitbart News has resurfaced, and it showcases Muslim children in Houston, the hometown of New Orleans terrorist Shamsuddin Jabbar. The children are pledging allegiance to the Iranian supreme leader.
I will be your soldier. I'll be your supporter. Be your biggest lover. I promise to become like Mehdi. If not of my age, I will be yours.
That footage was aired in 2022 by Iranian state media. Most Americans are seeing this, however, for the first time. What's happening on our own soil? As Abraham Lincoln presciently warned, if America were to be destroyed, it would not be from the outside. Joining us now, Mel Kay, longtime Hollywood producer turned conservative firebrand and researcher from The Mel Kay Show. Mel Kay, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. And, you know, it's such a time that we have to really just be honest with ourselves. Who are we? What is liberty? What is freedom? What does America stand for? And this is an individual inside job by every American citizen. And I really think it's important that people start to get real about the danger we have in America, and homegrown terrorists or not, this is happening to children in our country too. What you just showed in Houston, just in a different way, indoctrinating children from preschool on is something that is happening here as well. And we better take heed that the same people that are organizing likely what is going on in Houston with those children and has gone on all over the Islamic world is happening to our children in a different way, but with the same intent, I believe.
Well, I mean, those children, no doubt, have parents who aren't your run-of-the-mill American transplant. They're probably doing the very same thing. And it's not just Houston. There are schools famously in Virginia doing the same thing. There are schools, of course, in Dearborn, Michigan, as some conservative reporters have famously pointed out. They were excoriated for it back in the day. I think it was Laura Loomer and a handful of pretty bold reporters who, on pointing this out a few years ago, were absolutely slammed for it. And today, it's not taken with as much shock anymore. It's almost like people have internally absorbed that this is happening, but aren't quite sure what to do about it.
Yeah, I think that it's all been part of a massive psychological operation over the years to make Americans feel helpless when we see things like that. The old see something, say something became if you see something, you're a racist or you're Islamophobic or you're anti-Semitic or whatever. So it really dampened people from actually standing up where they are, which is what the American citizens must do, and get together with people and stop this kind of indoctrination. Because what happens, and this is all over history, is if the powers that be, in my estimation, this global public-private partnership running our country, want to indoctrinate our children to give up all the values and the things that make America great, and erase the Constitution, erase the Bill of Rights, stop teaching children about American greatness, you're going to have a generation of our children that grow up hating this country and siding with these people, which I believe is all by design. We are in a very dangerous time.
Mel, look at what we saw with the pro-Palestinian protests all of last year. Kids who were not necessarily Palestinian, kids who were not necessarily from the region, who would have no ostensible link to it, were waking up and deciding to don the garb and say they were marching on the plight of Palestine, fighting for Palestine. That's the kind of radicalization that seems to have been happening under the surface, and it just seemingly spontaneously erupts. But this has been happening for several decades.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we have to be cognizant that this is a Marxist color revolution within the United States of America, and the best target, just like Mao, has always been children. The younger, the better. But now we have generations also, Hollywood, video games, how everything is portrayed. Just saying the obvious of there's something very wrong on our college campuses, you'll be shut down as a racist, an Islamophobic. Just on December 12th, this month, the Biden regime put out a whole document, an executive order basically, on fighting anti-Arab, anti-Islam, Islamophobia in America. And then this happens within weeks. Is either America's going to continue to put their heads in the sand until we no longer have a country, or we're going to realize that this is a long-term plan to destroy our country from within, and to have generations after us that don't care. So the more that they have people coming here that disrupt our culture and our traditions and our values, the better to these people destroying our country. And the best thing they can do is to not only have these children, but the 500,000 they've brought in indoctrinated right before our eyes without us able to say anything. And the American people have to realize they need to be fearless. They need to stand up, and they need to know what is right and wrong is okay to say out loud.
I mean, you have been privy, and you walked away from this, but you were privy to a more subtle form of indoctrination, which is the land of Hollywood, the land of glitz and glamour and narratives that are weaved into screenplays I guess it's indoctrinating, but it's way more subtle. And I think that most of the influence came from China. We have seen Chinese influence weaved into our screenplays. Why don't you see, radical Islam weaved into the screenplay? Why haven't they been able to make inroads in Hollywood and China has?
Well, I think that they're all, if you really look above everything, which is what I try to do and follow the money, it's really a global public-private partnership. And as much as we want to point our fingers at China, America doesn't know enough of the history of China and the US and what happened. You know, Carter just died. Most people don't know about Brzezinski's grand chessboard and the long-term plan of having no nation states. And the problem often is that the one nation state in the world that actually the people can stand up and stop it is the United States, and particularly our Constitution. So watching this over decades, I honestly believe that people are taking different tacks, because if people think that the Muslim Brotherhood isn't working with the Chinese Communist Party and isn't working with other authoritarian governments around the world to disrupt America and tear us down from the inside out, particularly our freedom and our liberty and our Constitution and our privacy, then they don't know what happened here. And they have to pay attention to the beginning of the opening up of China at that particular time with Carter and Brzezinski and Rockefeller and Kissinger, and that China has always been the test model for the rest of the world. So to me, there is a situation going on where the people that are manipulating our country and the world right now don't have an allegiance or alliance to any nation, any flag, any people, any religion. They are power for power's sake, and they do this through regional influence campaigns. So Black Lives Matter, of course, was funded by all these same globalist billionaires, along with the CCP, along with Muslim Brotherhood. So we really have to look at that. And what's very scary, and I've been calling out CARE for decades, the second that this terrorist attack happens, they tell us to go to CARE. These NGOs are the biggest problem in our country. And that is what's going on, you know?
You know, I wanted your take on this too. There's an interesting optics problem that has popped up. The New York Post was able to obtain an exclusive look at the world, the home of the terrorist in New Orleans. Jabbar's home in Houston, Texas was opened up to these reporters, and it was full of technology, chemicals, a Quran that was very conveniently left open to a very specific passage on martyrdom. And Mel, what gets me about this video of the reporter walking through is that the press was allowed access to this house just days after the attack. And according to Jenny Terr, the reporter in the video, the press arrived at the house before the FBI did, and yet somehow the FBI had already gone through it. This story smells, and the press looks like it's been duped. I'm old enough to remember that Trump's attempted child assassin's house was not only off limits, the press wasn't even that curious about his backstory. What do you think is going on here optically?
Honestly, I think it's a demoralization campaign for the American people, very similar to what Yuri Bezmenov, the defector from Russia, warned us about. This is at the same time, they're giving Liz Cheney medals and they're sending more money to Ukraine. This is a demoralization, dehumanization, a attempt again and again to make the American people give up everything that we have, everything that we stand for a little bit more security and privacy, because obviously after every one of these things, it becomes, well, we have to get more security, we have to do this and that. What is going on with this reporter down in New Orleans is almost unbelievable. It feels like a movie, like a sketch. I don't even know what's going on other than to say they are totally demoralizing us.
You'll appreciate this as a screenwriter, but you know, it felt like the screenwriters for a Hallmark movie were told to go stage a house.
Yeah, I keep saying the screenwriters that are working with the State Department and the intelligence community and the military are getting worse and worse. I guess it's the DEI screenwriting hiring of the CIA. I'm not really sure what to make of it. All I know is that it's to make the American people feel helpless, hopeless. The FBI is not working for us. They're not protecting us. They don't care. And that is what's going on. We already don't trust the intelligence agencies, especially the post-Patriot Act agencies that shouldn't exist. But now they're telling us, don't worry, we don't care about you at all. We're not even securing this spot. We're not going to find anything here. I mean, remember all the investigations after 9/11? They're like, we just don't care anymore. That's what they're saying to the American people. It is a full-on psychological warfare tactic to demoralize us to feel like we are alone.
They absolutely don't care about 9/11 even. Look at what the Biden administration is pushing with the masterminds, the architects of 9/11, pushing for leniency in their sentencing. And I was talking about this on my show yesterday. It's so disturbing to watch the compassion that is being extended to men who have killed and destroyed the lives and the history of American security for decades to come.
Yes,
Mel K,
absolutely.
always a pleasure. We'll make sure to tune into the Mel K Show for more amazing insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Great work. Really appreciate you.
Will Costco keep DEI on the shelves? One of the producers of the mass hit Daily Wire documentary, Am I Racist?, Ben Capel, joins us next. We'll be right back. As companies move to get rid of their DEI initiatives, one company in particular seems desperate to cling on, offering plenty of DEI in bulk. That company is Costco. No surprise, a company that runs on suburban, latte liberals who would want to keep this initiative. These are the last of the Mohicans when it comes to DEI love. Costco's board of directors doubled down in this statement. Our success at Costco Wholesale has been built on service to our critical stakeholders, employees, members, and suppliers. Our efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion follow our code of ethics. They are also encouraging stockholders to vote against a measure that would dismiss their commitments to DEI. Their rival, of course, Walmart, was quick to dismantle their DEI programs after Trump's resounding victory. So, will Costco's big bet pay off? Or will shoppers and families pass on their free samples of CRT and white guilt? Joining us now, one of the producers of the Daily Wire's Am I Racist? You may recognize him if you watched it. Welcome back, Ben Capel.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
I am shocked that this is still a conversation that corporate America thinks is a good idea. If they want it to stay in place, it's almost wiser for them to just let it stay in place but not make an ideological stand. Where do you think this decision is coming from?
Well, I think a lot of these executives are so insulated from the actual problems and what they're feeling and what Americans are feeling on the ground. I really just hope that the corporation Costco doesn't have to learn this lesson the hard way. And with Americans constantly rejecting this notion of DEI and of anything but a merit-based system, which is exactly what we did in November, which is what we did with the success of the movie Am I Racist? It's really heartbreaking to see that we still have to go down these knockout, drag-out fights for what is obviously the common sense move to abandon this BS philosophy.
You know, you have these incredible spokespeople and activists and thinkers. You know, Matt Walsh, your team over at Daily Wire. You have Robbie Starbuck, who's done incredible work fighting DEI initiatives in corporate America. And there seems to have been a lot of traction, compounded by the election results. So with Costco going this direction, it's as if they made the calculation. They're not afraid to alienate the voters who are not on board with this program. And Costco must have made some kind of financial calculation here. Is it going to result in the leadership making any kind of course corrections if the buyers, if the shoppers end up boycotting Costco?
Well, we'll see. I hope I'm not put in that situation personally. I'm a Costco executive member myself. There's nothing I love more than going out there on a Saturday and getting my $1.50 hot dog and a few free samples while ordering a metric ton of whatever condiments I need for this fiscal quarter. So I hope we're not put in that situation, because absolutely they will feel that cost at their bottom line.
Yeah, no, the major boycotts that have happened in recent years, especially over this issue, have been fairly effective, and corporations seem to have taken notice.
No, absolutely. If you look at what happened with the Bud Light scandal, if you look at what's been going on with Walmart and all the other work that Robbie Starbuck, Matt Walsh, and all these other activists are doing, it is wildly successful. And no matter what these guys are saying right now, they will have to come to terms with where the majority of the market is. And it's not with this ideological insanity. It's with that meritocracy that we were talking about earlier.
Ben Capel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, our viewers peer into their crystal balls and share what the future holds. It's time now for Mark My Words. Up next.
This is my phone. It's also my new bank, GoToBank, the ultimate app that makes banking super easy. There are no monthly fees with direct deposit, and I earn 4.5% APY on my savings. It's mobile banking at its best. Open an account at gotobank.com.
Here at Allegiance, we feel like American flags should be made in America.
When we started Allegiance, we were shocked to learn how many American flags were actually being made overseas.
Every flag we make is proudly crafted in the USA with superior materials.
Join us in our mission to keep the American flag truly American.
Visit showallegiance.com to order your high-quality American flag today. That's showallegiance.com.
Are you looking for fast, high-quality medical care? All Valley Urgent Care has you covered. Our new convenient location in El Centro, right in front of the hospital, is now open and ready to serve you. With 2 locations in El Centro and 1 in Brawley, visit us today and experience high-quality health care.
The World War II Memorial, a testament to the victory and sacrifices of our troops. This monument stretches over 7 acres of the National Mall. Its epicenter is the Rainbow Pool, surrounded by 56 granite pillars, each representing the state or territory that fought for our freedoms during World War II. The columns are joined by a bronze rope, representing the bonding of our nation in troubling times. The Freedom Wall, on the westernmost part of the memorial, bears 4,048 golden stars, one for every 100 American deaths, and each death marking the price of our liberty. You're watching One America News, your nation, your news.
It's time now for Mark My Words. Today's submission comes from our friend Ami Kozak.
So it's 2025, and everyone's got their goals, especially their fitness and health goals. I have them too. And I think I figured out why it's so hard as a parent with young kids to lose weight. Because it's like you're surrounding yourself with all this food temptation. It's like, how many times can I sit there and eat a salad while they eat pizza and grilled cheese and French fries in front of me? It's like, imagine being an addict trying to get off drugs, but you live in a house full of junkies who are constantly using. That leftover macaroni looking mighty good right now. They're not only using, but they're barely eating what they're using, and most of it's just leftovers staring at you. Pasta, pizza. Good luck, everybody.